lucky today to have Dr. Michael Freeman. He is the founder of Econa, and he's also a professor at UCSF. I'll let him make the full introduction, but just wanted to give a big warm welcome.
Thanks, Patty. And gee, I'm so grateful that to be able to be collaborating with Generator and to meet all of the fabulous entrepreneurs that you guys are associated with, and have this opportunity to share some kind of high-level knowledge about entrepreneur mental wellness. Before we dive in, I also wanted to introduce my colleague, Alice Liu, who's our program director, and she'll be facilitating some of the dialogue today. So Alice, do you want to mention anything about the dialogue process?
Yeah, thank you, Michael. I just wanted to say hello to everyone and let you know that you can pepper in questions anytime in the chat, and I'll be reading them out loud to Dr. Freeman. So go ahead and pop those in whenever you have a question.
Okay. Before we get started, let me just frame today by saying I want this to really be as useful for all of you as possible. And I learned from Patty before putting together today's talk that a lot of people associated with Generator have had workshops in the past on themes or topics related to entrepreneur mental wellness, which is great because it's just so cool that you guys are making it a priority. Like Patty said, I'm a professor, so I'm like really experienced at teaching. But I think particularly for entrepreneurs, like interactive learning can be kind of one of the most useful ways to embed big ideas. So feel free to slow me down, jump in, interact, and let's just make this really as useful as possible so that you can get as much as you can. Let's see. Okay, so I wanted to focus today on what I call the mental wellness skill sets of successful entrepreneurs. And I'm going to address 3 of them, which are down here in this box in the lower left-hand corner. One of them is—
Michael, I think
yes.
You need to share your screen.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you for the technical support there. Okay, let's try again. All right, regarding mental wellness skill sets of successful entrepreneurs, I'm going to really focus on 3 of them. And I start with self-awareness and self-care. We'll talk a little bit about emotional intelligence. And then at the end, I'll try to summarize with like a kind of framework for a wellness lifestyle. The idea of which is to kind of support sustained mental wellness. But let me first just take a second to introduce myself and to introduce Econa. About myself, as you've heard, I'm a psychiatrist and I work exclusively with entrepreneurs. I'm also a serial entrepreneur. I've started half a dozen companies over the years, and one of them I was the CEO for about 12 years. So I have had a lot of experience kind of living in your shoes, and helps me alternate back and forth between kind of a therapy mode and a lived experience mode of entrepreneurship. And I'm also part of a research team, an international group of academic researchers, and we study entrepreneur mental wellness. So we have like very large data sets to illustrate like the key underlying dimensions of mental health and mental wellness among entrepreneurs. And with that in mind, my colleagues and I have started this new company called Econa. And we're trying to build a science-based center of excellence for entrepreneur mental wellness. And how we achieve our objectives are by offering facilitated founder groups, which are forming right now. So any entrepreneurs affiliated with Generator, you're welcome to join a small group of 5 to 8 people with a highly skilled facilitator to deal with your own personal growth and development issues. We work with accelerators, venture capital firms, entrepreneur networks to facilitate the emergence of mental wellness support programs and services. And we do research and we do consulting, and that's kind of why I'm here today. So let's just start by, let me ask you to kind of close your eyes and think for a second and just make a little mental checklist for yourself. What would you say are your greatest superpowers? Think about that. Just think about like 1 or 2 superpowers that really have enabled you to be as successful as you are. And then next, I want you to think about what are your greatest vulnerabilities? What if you do a post-mortem on your company, what is the most likely reason that it wiped out? Having to do with who you are as a person. And then just one last question. Please give some thought to what are you doing right now to stay mentally well? And I know that one of the things you do right now to stay mentally well is come to workshops like this. So congratulations, you're already making your own mental health a priority. But think about what you do that is your mental wellness maintenance strategy at the moment. All right, so keeping that in mind, this is what I am not going to talk about today. When we planned this originally with Patty, she told me that a lot of entrepreneurs at Generator have already had exposure to programs related to resilience and to mindfulness and to stress management. And so I'm not going to review what you've already learned other than to say this is basic self-care for mental health promotion. If there's anything on this list that you haven't thought about that you're not doing, you need sunlight. Exercise is critical. Exercise is as effective as antidepressants. Sleep-wake cycle regularity, and you know as an entrepreneur that can be a challenge. Having good nutrition, maintaining your body weight, having social support, having some kind of a mindfulness practice, making sure to build pleasurable activities into everyday life, using your stress management skills and your coping skills. You know, we could talk for a whole day about all of this, and other people can talk about it with you as well. So I just want to get this on the map as basic self-care for mental wellness. And then for the rest of our conversation today, kind of go beyond this into some areas you may not have already been exposed to. This is a summary of some of the research my team has done. This comes from a study that was sponsored by the Kauffman Foundation that we did in collaboration with University of California and the Gallup organization, where we compared 1,000 entrepreneurs with 1,000 managers. What popped out to me, and a lot of what motivates me as a psychiatrist to want to get out of my office and talk with you and others more broadly, is that in this population, 3% of the entrepreneurs had made suicide attempts. That's not a small number. And 1.7% had a history of psychiatric hospitalization. Close to 40% reported a lifetime history of, some kind of mental health condition. And as you know, even if you're someone who doesn't have any mental health issues at all entrepreneurs are subject to a lot of stress and adverse events and traumatic situations. So entrepreneur mental health is a real issue, and you'll recognize some people who've been very important to us. These are entrepreneurs who ended up taking their own lives one way or another. And I guess, again, back to what motivates me, the families of these people end up calling me, and I've spent a lot of time debriefing families. So what I want to say to you basically is really prioritize your own wellness. Getting your company to succeed at all costs is just not worth it. Business is part of what you do. It's not who you are. But let's talk about who you are. And this is like a big concept that I want to share with you today. This is a diagram that illustrates what the statistics I just told you with a little bit of a twist. And that is that you as entrepreneurs, we as entrepreneurs, I put myself in this bucket because I'm here launching a business. So this is a product beta test. Thank you for participating. We entrepreneurs are part of a unique population. And what I mean by that is if you can think of the difference between a Labrador Retriever and a French Poodle, you can see that, yeah, they're both dogs, but they have a lot of differences that you can characterize. And the same is true for entrepreneurs. And so, I want for all of us to begin thinking about ourselves as what I call a neurotribe. And I'll tell you more about that in a minute. But this diagram illustrates there's a world of people with pre-existing mental health conditions. And you can see, and this green circle represents us as entrepreneurs. What I'm showing you here is that all entrepreneurs have, not all entrepreneurs, but the vast majority of entrepreneurs have a pattern of personality traits, and I'll explain what that means, that distinguishes us. And that there's a big overlap between entrepreneurs and people with prior mental health issues. And then in the yellow circle here, whether you're somebody who had ADD in high school or never had a mental health issue in your life, being an entrepreneur can trigger these mental health issues as well. And so I refer to this as neurodiversity. And kind of user's guide to your own brain. What does neurodiversity mean for entrepreneurs? Well, it means three things. It means, like I just said, you have that unique personality profile. And if you can, personality by personality, I mean like default settings in your mind. You are vulnerable to a specific set of mental health conditions. Entrepreneurs don't have more mental health conditions or more mental health issues than managers. They just have different ones. And so what's important is to know what are the different mental health issues that are more likely to pop up in your life so that you can proactively manage that. And then narratives. Narratives that come from your own early life experience, family of origin experience, what you took away from growing up, and narratives that are actually and just another manifestation of an underlying mental health condition. Okay, I'm going to talk about personality. Actually, let me just, before I dive in, let me just stop for a second. Anybody care to throw out a couple words that, like, how you would describe your own personality? Are you like bold or timid? Are you curious? Are you avoidant? How would you describe your own personality? Dedicated. Okay. Are there other words to describe your personality? Hardworking. Okay. Deeply thoughtful. This is great. Other ways you describe yourself? Introverted, hardworking, perfectionistic, talkative. Yes. Persistent, inspired. Oh, I love these. Couple more. They're all going to come back. Observational, yes. Have a sense of perspective. Curious, quiet, attentive. Okay, thank you. Okay. These personality, what you described are personality traits. You did a great job. And what I want you to understand is that personality traits are 50% genetically transmitted. If you're the person who's dedicated or conscientious or inspired or curious, you probably were like that for your whole life because you were born that way. And but it's only 50%. And what I'm about to tell you, for example, is that most entrepreneurs are extroverted. If you are the person who was just introduced to yourself by being introverted, not to worry, because the other 50% is learned. And so any of these personality traits that you may not be either burdened by or blessed with by virtue of just inheriting it from your family, you can do a lot to overcome it and to learn it. I'm going to focus on 5 primary personality traits to start, because these are the ones that there's been this is called the Big 5 personality trait profile, and this has been studied for the last 40 years, hundreds of studies, thousands and thousands of research participants. These traits are found among all people in every part of the world, regardless of level of development. Indigenous people who have never met a Westerner before have this exact same personality traits as Westerners that got a PhD. And all I'm trying to show you here is that whatever that trait was that you just noticed in yourself, it's embedded in a brain network. And this is just a picture that from brain scans that illustrates exactly where in the brain these traits live. And there are 5 of them: extroversion, conscientiousness, openness to experience, neuroticism, and agreeableness. And everybody has all 5, but not in equal measure. And this is kind of a busy slide, so let me talk you through it. First, I'm going to show you what this little, molecule down here on the bottom. That is a picture of dopamine, which is a neurotransmitter, and it's the transmitter that's associated with motivation, pleasure, reward, and it's very important to entrepreneurs. It's kind of the rocket fuel of entrepreneurship, and it is some personality traits are result from elevated levels of dopamine or differences in dopamine processing. And I showed them here in white, and everything in this white box is the typical personality profile of an entrepreneur. The E again stands for extroversion, and all of these traits have subtraits. Extroversion associates with enthusiasm, and I'm sure you're very enthusiastic about what you're doing, as well as assertiveness, which you need in order to be a leader and to get things done. The conscientiousness, the subtrait is industriousness. The person who just described himself or herself as like hardworking and dedicated, very industrious, that's typical. That's part of this is the secret sauce of how people, entrepreneurs get ahead. Openness to experience. This is the curiosity about the world, creativity, constantly learning new things. So if you are always networking because you're extroverted and you're very curious, you get all kinds of information, and you speak a couple languages, and you have friends that have different genders or different ethnic backgrounds or different ages, and pretty soon you begin to see mega trends and opportunities that other people just don't see, which is part of your opportunity recognition. And then intellect. Entrepreneurs, happy to tell you, even though you didn't get good grades, you're smart. And there's a difference between intellect and intelligence. The intelligent people know how to get good grades, and the entrepreneurs with intellect have more like street smarts. And this is why the B students end up being the entrepreneurs who hire the A students. Some of these other traits are more common among other people, less so among entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs actually tend to be pretty resilient, pretty stable people to start with. And as compared to the managers that would have more neuroticism, more likely to be withdrawn, anxious, depressed, emotionally volatile. And so when I say that entrepreneurs have suicidality, psychiatric hospitalization, 38-40% incidence of diagnosable mental health issues, this shows that you guys can withstand a lot of stress and pressure before you begin to be symptomatic. Most people cannot go through what entrepreneurs go through. They just don't have the innate stability and resilience to handle the risk and the uncertainty and the pressure. Agreeableness. This is the characteristic of people who are compassionate, people who are polite, and bad news, I think, to some extent, and also good. Entrepreneurs do not tend to be the world's nicest people. They can be the rebels without a cause, or the rebels with a cause, but just CEO of their own universe. And again, not everybody, but on average, less empathic, less compassionate and less vulnerable to depression than, let's just say, managers. Now I'll illustrate this with one more slide here, and then I'll stop for a second. So what I'm trying to show you here is that 3 primary colors, if you blend 3 primary colors, you can eventually make every single color. And if you blend these 5 genetically transmitted primary personality traits, you can eventually make every single personality trait. And some of these blended personality traits or composite personality traits are also really common among entrepreneurs. Again, I didn't put the references on this slide, but this research goes back until the 1970s, actually. tens of thousands, hundreds of personality studies have been done on entrepreneurs, including like tens of thousands of entrepreneurs that agreed to be in research. And I hope one day maybe you guys will agree to be in research. It's how we learn. But this is what it boils down to: self-efficacy, risk propensity, need for autonomy, innovativeness, internal locus of control. That means you believe that you're in charge of your own destiny. You don't believe that you're a victim and everything bad always happens to you. Proactive personality, that means anticipating what needs to happen and skating to where the puck is going, rather than reacting to what just happened. And then passion, I assume that you know about that. And so I want to answer any questions you might have about personality, but before I do, I just want to show you what this looks like. I took notes, and on Tuesday and Wednesday, I'm a psychiatrist. I'm in my office. I see entrepreneurs all day long, and I want to just share a little bit about personality that came through my office in the last 2 days. About extroversion and enthusiasm, I talked with a gentleman who is like the world's greatest networker. He's constantly networking, and he's social climbing. He's building his social capital, but he gets so like turned on by the energy of networking that he doesn't make time to run his own business, and so the business kind of like poops out as he's out there. So he's very enthusiastic. The other subtrait with the extroversion is assertiveness that I mentioned. Assertiveness is a kind of a code word for a lot of dominance related behavior. Entrepreneurs tend to be dominant. That's why you don't work for somebody else. If an entrepreneur, like if your company fails, it's highly likely you won't get a job. It's more likely that you'll try to start something else because you don't want to be in a hierarchy. But this same gentleman, highly assertive and doesn't like manage it properly, and as a result, he get into like these power struggles with all of his key stakeholders, like suppliers, investors, customers. And so he's like he's out there networking all the time, but getting into power struggles. And so he's not managing it properly. I talked with a guy who is really creative, like very, very kind of elevated levels of this openness to experience. And he's growing a team now, and he decided to grow a team in Montreal, Canada. And why does he want to go into Montreal, Canada? Because those people speak French and they think different than people who speak English. And his theory is that the more like really different kinds of people he can get into his company, the more likely the company is going to be to benefit from all kinds of different points of view. The same guy, it's a tech company, but in his office space, he built an art studio. It's like full of arts and crafts supplies and an easel and paints and, you know, glue and tape and paper and scissors. And he just like wants people to like go and do arts and crafts projects whenever they feel like it, because he believes in stimulating the creative team. I mentioned intellect as one of those traits that entrepreneurs like really do the big deep dive. And I talked to this one guy who what really turns him on is data analytics. And in his spare time, he watches like sports, events, and comes up like with his own version of data analytics to predict outcomes of sporting events. I mentioned that trait of agreeableness that most entrepreneurs don't have, but some do. And one person I spoke with yesterday had the problem that she feels guilty about firing people. And so as a result, she can't let go of people that she needs to let go of. And then everybody else on the team is upset because these people aren't performing, and that is going to be bad for them, and because it adversely affects the results of the company. And so she needs to learn how to manage that issue. Another entrepreneur I spoke to yesterday is, most entrepreneurs can be a little bit, disagreeable may not be the right word, but they're not people pleasers. Let's just put it this way. This one I talked with is like the opposite of a people pleaser, and just will always let people know what they're doing wrong. And as a result, drives away key leaders in the organization, and can't grow the business because can't attract and retain important people. I could say more, but let me just take a pause here. Any what does this bring up for you? Any thoughts about personality or any questions about personality and how it may be a source of either superpowers or vulnerabilities, or any questions I can answer about that? And feel free to put it in chat or just ask directly. No? All right, well, feel free to jump in. Here's what I would ask you to, whoops. Got to share. Here's what I would ask you to think about, based on this. I say go back and really describe your own personality. And by the way, you can go online and get free personality self-tests. Just look up Big 5 personality self-test, and it's about 100 questions, and you'll get a very fine-grained view of. Again, these are your default settings. This is how you're most likely to respond in certain circumstances. And I give it some thoughts. Once you can really characterize this for yourself, where do the superpowers come from? What are your risks? If you're that, risk propensity, if you're the person who takes a lot of risks, which most entrepreneurs do, how do you, what can you do to make sure you don't take the wrong risk and wipe out? And remember, most businesses fail. I mean, you know this going in, that only 1% of people can end up being in the top 1%. And so, and if your business fails, on average, it has to do with things that are beyond your control. It's, competing technologies, changes in the environment. There happened to be a pandemic and as you opened your restaurant, but sometimes it has to do with your own vulnerabilities related to your personality and your leadership style. And I think that's what we would like to help you understand and help you grow with. Now, that was personality. Let's talk about mental health. And these are again, it goes back to dopamine. Entrepreneurs are characterized by atypical dopamine physiology. And some mental health conditions are very dopaminergic, and those are ADHD, bipolar disorder, bipolar spectrum conditions, um, obsessive compulsive personality, and addiction. And by addiction, I mean behavioral addictions like video game, as well as substance addictions. And if you think back to my very first slides where I showed you the statistics and the Venn diagram, if you can only get one thing out of this talk, what I would like you to take home is whatever mental health issues you may have, it's normal. This is why I call it entrepreneur mental health differences. You are part of this unique species, and it's normal to have these mental health differences. And a lot of the reason why entrepreneurs like wait so long to get help is because of a sense of shame and stigma. And either it comes from how you were raised, or comes from the culture you grew up in, or it comes from you imagine that investors are not going to put money into your company if they find out you have ADD. But so it's just really important for you to take a deep breath and understand entrepreneurs are different, and different in a really beautiful way. The world could not be here without entrepreneurs. And we have to just accept these differences. And if one of these things applies to you, or something else like it's not on this list, anxiety, depression, OCD, whatever, it's just part of the fabric of who you are as a person in entrepreneurship. And the more you can be aware of it, the more you can prevent it from interfering with you getting the individual life results and the business results that you would like. I'm just going to do high level on what these conditions look like, so that you're aware of them. And again, if you think any of this applies to you, there's a self-test available online, and it's all really not that hard to manage if you know what you're doing. So attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, I'm going to just talk about it a little bit. Really common among entrepreneurs. It's characterized by impulsivity and distractibility and hyperactivity. And and in our research, it's one of the most commonly experienced conditions by entrepreneurs. And if you have ADHD, you probably have known about it since you were like in second or third grade. It's genetically transmitted. And what's kind of, to me, what's very cool about it is that there are now a number of studies which show that the kids who have ADHD in middle school are like significantly more likely to be entrepreneurs when they grow up. So there's kind of, the career that you select has to be a good fit for who you are as a person. And entrepreneurship is a very good fit for ADHD, because all of that energy, all of that hyperactivity, all of the thrills that get you to hyperfocus really is, quite common experience. And the other good news about it, again, this is our research, and it's been a number of others have found the same thing, is that entrepreneurs with the hyperactive impulsive ADD profile, if you don't wipe out, you're likely to be a high achiever. That these entrepreneurs like get better business results. but they also wipe out. And the way that these symptoms interfere. Oh, here's one. I met a new entrepreneur on Tuesday, and his complaint was he could not read 2 pages in a book. By the time he gets to the end of the page, he can't remember what was at the beginning of the page. And that when he's in meetings with his staff, people have to like communicate with him in sound bites because otherwise he gets distracted. And he tends to interrupt people and that annoys them. So they're like, these symptoms can like interfere with your personal life and with your business life as well. So it could be like a kind of a secret sauce, like success factor for you. But there's also some danger like associated with it that's important to learn how to manage. And it's like treatable, and the treatment does involve medication. It does involve like a lot of learning, a lot of organizational, behavioral kinds of skills and strategies, and self-care. Bipolar spectrum, this is kind of where I spend a lot of time personally as a psychiatrist. I kind of specialized in bipolar disorder. To me, I love people who are in the bipolar spectrum because it's where so much of the creativity and the energy and the kind of the charisma and the visionary leadership is, a lot of that's associated with bipolar spectrum. And kind of what you need to know there. And Elon Musk, for example, tweets about his like bipolar highs and his bipolar lows, and a lot of like really, this one again is associated with excellent, better than average business results. Most entrepreneurs that are kind of have some bipolar spectrum loading tend to be like hypomanic, low-grade mania. These are the people who are like thrilled to be alive, and they just seem kind of happy and like enjoying the party. Too much of that becomes manic episodes, and that can be disabling, very treatable. The flip side of that is depression, and depression can have very negative effects on both your business outcomes and your life outcomes. Treatable. And then there are some people that kind of fluctuate. It's called cyclothymia. So you're kind of up for a while, you're down for a while, you're up for a while, and those mood fluctuations can be problematic. So we found with this bipolar spectrum that, at least in one of our studies, that entrepreneurs are maybe twice as likely, maybe even more than twice as likely to have bipolar spectrum conditions than people in the public in general. So again, it's very common. It's a good fit. If you're hypomanic, hey, nothing better to do with all that energy than build a company, right? It's a good fit. So obsessive compulsive personality disorder. This is not obsessive compulsive disorder. Obsessive compulsive disorder is, known for people who like double check and are like washing their hands all the time and hoarding things, and organizing their closets so that it's all color coded. That's not OCPD. OCPD is more of a personality thing that is characterized by perfectionism. And one of you, when I asked to describe your personality. Somebody said perfectionistic. Guess what? You're right where you're supposed to be. The downside of that is, of course, never good enough, and you can drive yourself crazy. This is why, at Facebook, they say that shipped is better than done, because they know that a lot of entrepreneurs can't ship because it's not perfect. So it's also characterized by like this workaholism, the industriousness that I talked about as a personality trait, the hard work. That's, it's often associated with passion, like really passionate about what you're doing. You're really in the flow zone. You're just like enthusiastic about building what you're building. That's not workaholism. Workaholism is you like literally cannot turn it off. You burn yourself out and you just can't go to bed. That is more associated with this OCPD. And, again, need for control. So if you find yourself being a control freak, you can't delegate. And we found this, actually. We, in that big study I told you about, we looked at personality traits, and we found, to my surprise, that entrepreneurs were less able to delegate than managers. I guess if you're a manager, you're supposed to be delegating and managing. That's what your job is. But if you're building a business, you have to hand off any process and any operation to somebody else so that you can build the next one. And we actually found that for a lot of entrepreneurs, the need for control was so great that delegating became a problem. So this OCPD, it's again, it's dopaminergic, it's treatable, and I'm trying to share my screen. There we go. And the treatment is by and large behavioral. There are a lot of just behavioral strategies that help you manage this. Medication sometimes has a role, but this is typically more behavioral. And then the last thing I want to talk about is this impulsive, compulsive, addictive behavior. And it's characterized by loss of self-control. It could be video games, it could be alcohol, it could be pot, could be gambling. And what kind of amuses me is that there now are a bunch of researchers who are looking at serial entrepreneurship as a form of behavioral addiction. These are people who just can't stop starting companies. And then if you are a serial entrepreneur and you do very well, then you graduate and you become a venture capitalist, and then you get to help start 30 or 40 companies at a time. So I think what's important here about impulsive behavior, compulsive behavior, addictive behavior, I think what's important about that is the loss of self-control. It's like binge eating. If dinner is over and it's time to go to bed, but now you go back to the refrigerator and now you pull yourself away and you go back and you lose self-control, and you, like the potato chips, you can't eat just one. Then it begins to get into the problem zone. And addiction is a process whereby the reward circuits in your brain get literally hijacked by whatever the addictive substance or behavior might happen to be. And the result of that is you need more and more and more to get the same effect. Instead of having one glass of wine, you need two, and then pretty soon, you need 3 or 4 and it's half a bottle, and hey, I opened the bottle, might as well finish it. And then it's the same with shopping. And you know, the addictive shoppers are like always like taking stuff back because they buy, I just ordered 30 pairs of shoes, you know, how many do you really need? What I want to put up there on the board for you guys to think about is that money itself can be an addictive substance. And be careful about getting addicted to money, because it's like alcohol or anything else. You get into this place where you need more and more and more to get the same result. I mean, think about when you made your first sale and like you got your first check and it wasn't that big, but it felt great. And now when you're getting checks that are 10 times, 100 times, you just signed $250,000 contract. And well, hey, that's great. Where's the $500,000 contract? So again, you desensitize to these rewards. And it's important, if you find yourself desensitizing and losing self-control and not being able to like enjoy whatever it is that was once enjoyable, that's your warning sign that you're kind of going down that path. All right, now I'm gonna just stop for a second. Any questions? This is your chance to talk to a psychiatrist. Don't be shy. Remember, we just destigmatized mental health. Anything I can answer for you about any of these issues? And
I guess,
yeah, go ahead.
sorry. Yeah, I was gonna say, I just have a comment. I like the part about money and how it's, I guess I've never thought about it as an addiction, but I guess the hard part for me to, I guess, compartmentalize is like me getting money, that kind of behavior, my love for it is kind of rewarded. So though I feel like a lot of people might be more prone to it because like the more I get, the more I can provide, right? Within a relationship, within other people. So it's hard for me to go. I guess the tools I would need, I'm not sure. Like, how do if I'm getting more money, I feel like I only get validated, nothing else. Who's gonna be like, you need to take it easy with that money thing? Like, if anything, they see opportunity. Yeah.
Okay, I'm so glad you brought that up. I read a book by one of these entrepreneur coaches, and he had a chapter on like, how much money should you make? And his answer was, you should have $150 million. If you don't really need more than $150 million. And like, my thought was, wow. Like, what is that about? So the question is, how much is enough? And do you have the ability to know when you've had enough to drink? Or do you know when you've played enough video games? Or do you know when you have enough money in the bank? You're absolutely right. You have your family, you want to take care of yourself, you want to take care of your family, you want your kids to go to college, you want to be able to live in a nice home, in a safe place, and be able to go outdoors easily and take a vacation. So I would say, just figure out for yourself how much is enough. And if you have enough, and maybe it's $15 million, or maybe it's $1.5 million, or maybe it's $150,000 a year. I don't know what it is for you, but whatever it is, if you can just in your own mind identify that it's some number, it is enough. And that when you get to enough and it doesn't feel like enough, I would just like pause and reflect. And the other thing that you said about validation, I wasn't really planning to get into this today, but I will, since you bring it up. And that is that I'm hoping that your sense of validation can come from within rather than from the outside. So if you're like somebody with, like high self-esteem, and you feel like you're a valid person no matter what, that's like a little bit different from the entrepreneur I spoke with yesterday, who he grew up in poverty, real poverty in a third world country. I mean, to the extent that the house had dirt floors and like a corrugated aluminum roof with holes in it, and every like monsoon season when it rained, the water would like drip into his bedroom, and like nobody ever figured out you could fix the roof. Anyway, now he's a successful entrepreneur, and he has this inner self-image of someone who isn't good because of the amount of poverty that he came from. And so his company has become, over the course of a decade, really profitable. And he just bought the first car he ever bought in his life. And it's like this like $60,000 Audi, luxury machine. And the only reason he uses it is to drive like 5 miles back and forth to work instead of taking, like Uber. So if the money, what I'm trying to say is, if he thinks that he will be more of a valid person in the eyes of others if he can have these like status symbols to show how like successful he is. And I'm kind of like digressing here, but it's important to me because so many of the entrepreneurs that I work with actually have low self-esteem. And they have low self-esteem because they grew up as kids with ADHD or learning disabilities or broken homes, alcoholic parents, whatever. And I'm in your journey to mental wellness, I would say if there's any self-esteem issues, try to deal with that, because it's not, business won't solve that for you. That's got to be personal growth. All right, sorry about that.
Michael.
Yeah.
We do have a few more questions, but we also, I know, only have 30 more minutes.
Yeah.
So would you like to take more questions, or would you like to take them at the end?
Maybe I'll take them at the end. Thanks so much
Okay.
for helping with pacing.
And I'll just, and just a quick note to everybody, I know that for these types of topics, it might not always be comfortable to put them in the chat. So if you prefer, you can private message me your question instead, and I'll make sure that we know that that's an anonymous question.
Okay,
actually,
thanks.
sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but actually, I know that some people do need to hop off around 1 p.m. So if you wouldn't mind taking a couple questions early, just in the interest of time.
You know what? However I can be of help,
Cool.
and I can come back. I mean, there's so much to say about mental wellness. What I was planning to talk about for going forward is like around emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence, we can like spend an hour and a half on emotional intelligence. And I was hoping to give you like a framework for like a daily mental wellness check-in. But the overall goal is for me to help you understand yourself. The self-awareness and self-care is really the foundation of the whole thing. So Patty, happy to do what you think is in the group's best interest.
Cool, sounds good. Here's the first question in the chat. It says, could you share some ways to work on the personality/behavior traits that could use improvement? Some examples are having a hard time delegating, emotional stability, openness, and someone has a follow-up question saying, yep, especially around delegating and ADHD.
All right, let's take them one step at a time. Okay, so the point of departure is to remember that these default settings are hardwired, and doing something different is going to require you to override the way your mind works. An example I use is the yellow light at the intersection. You and I are both driving through the intersection, to an intersection, and we see the yellow light. I'm a doctor, I'm cautious. My whole goal in life is do no harm. I really manage risk. It's a very high priority, and so I stop. You're an entrepreneur, you see an opportunity to get ahead, and you hit the gas and you go through. The odds are 100, we go through 100 yellow lights, and 99 out of 100 times it's going to be the same result because of our default settings. That's just the way we are inclined to react in these situations. And the one time you stop is because on the other corner you notice there's a police officer and you're going to get a ticket if you run the light. And so in spite of your instinct to take it, to exploit an opportunity, you override it. And so overriding it is, you can override these things. And that's what's going to really be required in order to have the best personal and business outcomes. So like with delegating, it's a learning curve. You need to learn how to do it. And a lot of the reasons people don't delegate is because they believe that, you believe that either you can do it faster and more effectively and get better results, or that the other person's going to screw up. Even though you hired them to do this job, you don't really, it's not easy. I would like practice, delegate small things first, transform yourself into a leader. There's in businesses that don't grow are typically run by people who are like more of a craft person. So like in my psychiatric practice, I'm in a solo practice. I don't grow my practice because I don't want to delegate patient care to anybody, because nobody's going to do it as well as me. And I have very, very high standards about the care I provide. And so I can't grow that business. But in entrepreneurship, you have to delegate in order to be able to grow, and you have to transform yourself from being a craftsperson into being a leader. And so in spite of how hard it is for you to delegate, you shouldn't have any job that somebody else can do. And so as soon as you have figured out what the job is, hand it off to somebody, and then turn yourself into a mentor and a leader and a teacher and help them succeed. Remember, all these people that are working for you or working for the company, nobody comes to work because they want to do a bad job. Everybody is motivated to succeed, and your job now is to empower them to succeed rather than to do it and quickly and efficiently and with good results. Start small, delegate little things, and then when you've done that, delegate bigger things, and then delegate bigger things, and build up confidence in the team. And then again, transforming yourself into a leader. When something doesn't work, when something goes wrong, 80% of the time it has to do with a problem with the system, and 20% of the time it has to do with a problem with the individual. So when the processes are not working and you're not getting the results you want, collaboratively debug the system. But if there is a person who just is not the right match for that job, then it's important for you to reassign them to a position that's going to be a really good fit with who they are. So that's that other personality trait of agreeableness. You can't feel guilty about being unpopular. If your job as a CEO is to make every choice based on what's in the best interest of the company. And if you do what's in the best interest of the company, you're going to be doing what's in the best interest of the individuals in the company. Because the team is executing on a mission, and if you execute properly and it's the right mission and the right strategy, then the company will succeed and everybody's going to have a better job and everybody's going to get to grow and have more compensation and more responsibility and live up to their potential. But that means you have to be unpopular and not and make your HR choices based on a kind of a blend of what's in the best interest of the individual and what's in the best interest of the company. Patty, what was another one of those traits that people wanted help with?
Yeah, there was emotional stability, openness, and then ADHD in general.
So emotional stability, if you don't feel stable, if you feel like you're emotionally volatile, if you have good days and bad days, if you burn out and check out, if you have a hard time regulating your emotions, if you can't curb your enthusiasm, if you can't tolerate frustration, if you lose your temper, I would say get help. That would be, and not coaching. There's a difference between coaching and therapy. Coaching is really about problem solving and helping you learn how to be a better executive. Therapy is really more about how to not be your own worst enemy, like understanding who you are and how to not get yourself derailed. And in this case, the stability has to do with lack of emotion regulation. And when we come back and talk about emotional intelligence, we'll talk a lot about emotion regulation. But suffice it to say that there are skills that you can learn that help you. And I'll just tell you one, just to show you, illustrate how that works. Let's imagine that you're like really upset with me right now because I'm like way too pedantic and I'm not answering your question, and you feel like this whole thing is a big waste of time. And why am I like sitting here? I'm just trying to make Patty happy by showing her that I really do care about Generator, but I'd rather be someplace else. Instead of getting into all of that negative emotional state where now you're unstable and you're having strong negative emotions, you can look at the sweater I'm wearing, and it's blue. And blue reminds you of the blue ocean that you visited on your vacation. And it reminds you of the blue sky that you would look up at when you were a kid lying in the grass and like watching the clouds go by. And the blue sky and the blue emotion and the blue ocean give you like these positive emotions. And now you can be watching me waste your time with this like rambling workshop and be in a positive emotional state. You managed your own instability by using an emotion regulation skill. So there are a bunch of those, and we should talk more about them. And it's really useful to learn how to do that. And then Patty, you said ADHD?
Yes.
So with ADHD, the very first thing is to learn what it is. A lot of people, let me ask you this. If you, I would ask, have you ever wondered whether or not you might have ADHD? And if the answer to that question is yes, then I would say find out. And you can go online and get this test called the ASRS. It's the Adult ADHD Symptom Scale or something like that, ASRS. And it's like 20 or 30 questions, and you can find out for yourself whether or not you have ADHD. And if you do, that's meaningful because it's associated with very bad outcomes unless you manage the downside risk. And if you do manage the downside risk, it's associated with good outcomes, both in life and in business. What are some like giveaways? Like if you're always interrupting, if like you're in a committed love relationship and your partner is telling you that everything I tell you is going in one ear and out the other ear because you're looking at me, but you're not really listening to me. And it's true because you're like internally distracted. You're like following your own, like you're in your head someplace instead of engaged with the other person. If you have problems with punctuality, if you're late, if you get disorganized, if you procrastinate, if there's like stuff that is important to do, but it's not interesting to do, and so you don't do it. All of these things are like little telltale giveaway signs that you might have ADHD. And it's not hard to treat. I mean, if you're going to get help with it, the medications are very important. So you'll need to work with a psychiatrist, at least to some extent. But the organizational, behavioral, and self-care skills are also really, really important. And it's not rocket science. It's as easy as look at your calendar at night so that you know what's going to happen tomorrow. And that way you don't go to the right meeting on the wrong day. And one more thing I'll just throw in about that one is it does affect relationships. And the other part of this talk that I didn't have time for, I guess, today has to do with having successful life outcomes, and relationships as part of that. So there are books about the ways in which ADHD affects relationships, and they're very significant. And so it's worth getting on top of that as well.
Thanks.
Okay.
Next
Yeah.
question in the chat is, it was a response to Michael's really good question earlier. So this person says, I never made the connection between productivity and addictive behaviors. I'm personally not attracted to money, but I am definitely addicted to success in other measures, always doing, doing, doing. At the same time, I have struggled with substance abuse in the past, and I'm worried this is the same kind of unhealthy behavior, but repackaged. Any tips?
Yes. All right, so the tip is so I was kind of, I'm going to talk about religion for a second. I went to Sunday school. I was sort of kind of given a basic religious education, and then became less relevant in life. But I read about the 10 Commandments when I was in Sunday school. And I realized that later in life, that the 10 Commandments were, at least the first one was written for entrepreneurs, because the first of the 10 Commandments is essentially take a day off, like observe the Sabbath. That's what it says. And I would say that is a really good tip. Why is that the most important? Why is that number one? I think that's number one because when this kind of list got written, somebody must have known that entrepreneurs are not going to take a day off unless you make it the law. So that would be my tip. Just take a day off, and like really take a day off. No cell phone, like no internet, just anything with the switch, turn it off and take a break. That would be a place to start. The Saturday rule, yes. And yeah. And I one step beyond that, if you're someone who has in the past had a problem with drugs or alcohol, or if you're someone who has a parent or a sibling or an aunt or uncle with a real addiction problem, it's genetically transmitted. You're vulnerable. And so I'd focus on like whatever it is, like learning some self-control skills. If you just like read up on relapse prevention skills, and if it's really hard to manage, like have an accountability partner. So they you know, there, if you go to AA, there's like a lot of things that happen in those self-help groups, but from the research perspective, the active ingredient of why these things work is the accountability partners. Have a sponsor, so get some help with it. And again, no shame, no stigma. It's a good thing, but too much of a good thing can be a bad thing. You've got a passion for living, and that's great. You got a passion for your business, that's great. The only problem is that the passion for your business can crowd out the rest of your life, and so too much of a good thing becomes a bad thing.
Thank you. Next question we have is, do you think striving for perfection while knowing that perfection isn't achievable is a good mindset to have?
Yes, and I like the way you asked that question. As long as you are realistic. I have this problem myself, and when I was the CEO of that company I ran for 12 years, there was the CMO, Chief Marketing Officer, and this guy was great. And eventually, but he was great. He had like fabulous results, really cool person. I really liked him very, very much, as did the customers. And he was pretty good about like leaving at 5. I mean, maybe he worked 50 hours a week, but he didn't work 60. And I would kind of walk by his office, and what I would notice was that his desk was a wreck. And unlike me, he knew how to leave. He knew how to leave work. The way he would leave work is he would turn off the computer, turn off the lights, and walk out the door. Like for me, you can see, here's my desk. It's clear. It's like that's like not my style. So I've got to do what you just said. I think in life, I generally get very good results. None of my businesses have ever failed. And none of my patients have ever been hospitalized. And I mean, I'm a perfectionist in that way. But knowing to turn off I learned something from this guy, which is that perfection is like an ideal, and it's kind of a goal, and it's aspirational. And it's really important to know when enough is enough and be able to move on from there.
Thanks. And then we do have another question or recommendation. Do you have any book titles for ADHD for relationships by any chance?
Yes, I have 2. The first one is called, Is It You, Is It Me, or Is It Adult ADHD? And I'll just tell you a story. This entrepreneur I knew, he got their Series A funding. It was great. And he bought a convertible. And his wife, and he has ADHD, and his wife asked him, did you park the car in the garage? No, I parked it in the driveway. Well, go out and park it in the garage. And then the next day, the same thing. The next day, the same thing. And then eventually he got sick of being like nagged, because his wife was always nagging him because he was always making mistakes, because people with ADHD make mistakes. And by the way, people with ADHD tend to get into romantic relationships with people who are like the opposite, orderly, compulsive, perfectionists. They make the trains run on time. It's kind of complementary DNA. It's good until it isn't. Anyway, one day he said, yeah, I parked it in the garage, stop nagging me. He didn't. It rained that day, the whole car got ruined. He parked it with the top down. So, okay, is he passive aggressive? Is she a control freak? Or is it that this marriage doesn't know how to manage adult ADHD? There was no emotionally safe way to talk about ADHD symptoms between the two of them. So is it you, is it me, or is it adult ADHD? And then the second is called the ADHD effect on marriage. And that one was like written by a psychologist who was married to a guy with ADHD. I think he actually was an entrepreneur. And it's all about how like she figured out how to love her husband by the two of them like learning about ADHD together, and how her being able to see the strengths as well as the vulnerabilities. And if you're in a relationship with somebody with ADHD, remember, it goes both ways, and it's all about complementarity, and it's all about creating this emotionally safe relationship container where you can be yourself and like help each other with things that may come naturally for one and don't come naturally for the other. If you're the orderly, perfectionistic, methodical partner of somebody with ADHD, good news is that your partner does have ADHD, otherwise your life would be really boring. And so there's the spontaneity and the energy and the excitement and the thrills that go along can be really good offset for that, you know, kind of personality where you can't leave until everything is done. All right, another question.
There's nothing left in the chat. Alice, do you happen to have any questions that were messaged to you?
I don't, but definitely if anyone has any, feel free to send them in.
Okay, so it looks like we have about 7 minutes left. Dr. Freeman, would you prefer to go over some additional content or wrap this up a couple minutes early? What do you think would be
Just
best?
looking at additional content for a second.
That's good.
Yeah, let me. Okay, okay, let me just do this. If we do this again, I'd like to talk about the narratives as well, because people's lives are shaped by their narratives. And I heard a couple of narratives this week. So what I want to say about narratives that shape your life is that some of them are based on your early life experience, and some of them are actually biological in nature, and they're related to mental health conditions. So I'll just give you an example of each. An example of a narrative that can be biological in basis is the soundtrack that goes along with depression. And that soundtrack is typically helpless, hopeless, worthless guilt. If you have a lot of thoughts about I'm a loser and I'm just making everybody else's life worse and people would be better off without me, and the situation is never going to get better and nobody can fix it, that could be a symptom of depression. And it's not something that you truly believe. And about that narrative, when you have like narratives related to depression or narratives related to anxiety, like catastrophic thinking, this is gonna fail for sure. If it can go wrong, it will go wrong. Those narratives tend to go away when the underlying mental health issues are managed. But some narratives are also related to your life experience that you bring with you on your journey. And one that happened yesterday. There's this entrepreneur I work with who sold her company, had an exit, and she made millions of dollars which was like really meaning a huge achievement. And then after she sold her company, she didn't go along with the sale. It was over. Acquiring company, like merged it into their operations. And then a month later, they turned off her laptop. And she felt like rejected, and it made her cry, and she felt like just damaged and like angry. And it turned out that this is someone who had suffered a lot of rejection in life and who had been an outcast as a kid, and like the other girls teased her, and she had a lisp, and she was overweight, and her parents had enough money to get by, but she couldn't go out to the movies when other kids could. And so she brought with her this whole like childhood experience of being bullied and being ridiculed and being rejected. And when they turned off the laptop, it brought the whole thing back. And she believed she was being rejected again, but she wasn't. She sold her company. Somebody else was running it now. And you turned off the laptop. That's it. It was just, that's the process of absorbing another company. So in addition to all of these personality traits and mental health conditions, the other thing about self-awareness is to be aware of your narratives. Some of them are related to mental health. Some of them are related to your family of origin. But that's kind of where therapy comes in. That's where friends come in, to help you correct any distortions that cause you to misread what's going on around you. It's very important to not misread, not see things through filters that are not accurate.
Got it. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Freeman. Thank you, Alice. We really appreciate your insight, your expertise, and really your knowledge so specific to entrepreneurs. If anyone wants the recording or has any questions or wants any sort of follow-up, feel free to email me. I'm just at patty@generator.com. You can also just email info@generator. Someone on our team will see it. Yeah, but thank you so much. We really appreciate you being here today.
Well, I'm speaking for Alice and myself here. We really appreciate the opportunity to work with you. What you're doing is very important. Your organization is amazing. The scope and the breadth of what you have done. And if I can just encourage any of you who are here today to be in relationship with Econa, we're here to help. The immediate thing is we do run facilitated founder circles, groups that are small, where you can work through a lot of these things that we talked about today. And then more broadly, in addition to Patty, if you want to invite us back, that'd be great. Otherwise, from time to time, we do have educational programs, and on our website, there's a resource section where you can download webinars and podcasts and that kind of thing. So we're here to help entrepreneurs be mentally well. That's our mission. When you succeed, we all succeed, and anything we can do to facilitate that, great. So again, thanks very much.
Awesome. Thank you, Alice. Thanks, Dr. Freeman. Thanks, everyone, for joining. Have a good one.
Thank you so much. This was so helpful. I really appreciate it.